Hello and welcome, I'm Arumba, thank you for joining me. Let's play some more Crusader Kings 2 with our tutorial series. So, there's a couple topics I want to cover before we begin unpausing the game for real this time. First off, we have a couple people who've just arrived in our court. Ermentrude Carling and Hildegard Carling have arrived in our court. This is because we just married them. You know, they just came over and they left West Francia, left the court of King Charles the Bald and joined our court. Now, who's in your court? How do you know who's in your court? Who is available to become on your council, and you know, why are they here? Can you kick them out? We're going to cover some of those topics and then just kind of look at it. We've got a court tab. Characters residing at the court of Earl Ku or Ko, or I don't know what that weird-looking U thing is. The court mainly consists of various unlanded nobles, but also the counselors, who can be landed vassals, imprisoned characters, and children being tutored by one of the courtiers. So we can see in our court, we are considered to be in our own court, and then everyone who's related to our court is here. Certain character interactions can only be done if someone's in your court. For instance, most commonly, if someone is in your court, you can force them to marry anyone else that's in your court. You are their liege, you are their boss, essentially. And let's say, for example, I invite the bastard son of King Charles the Bald to my court. I can force him to marry my daughter. But if I try to just send a diplomatic request to him and say, hey, would you like to marry my daughter? He could say no. So if he's willing to come to my court because he wants me to press a claim on the kingdom or something, then I can force him to become kind of tied to my family, and we can use that to expand our own character's influence on the area around us. Now, the other topic I wanted to cover was what these attributes do individually. Like, what is the effect? What ones are good? Which ones do what? And well, they're all good, but kind of what is the point? How does it all work? So let's talk about diplomacy first. Your personal diplomacy score is going to affect the opinion that people have of you if they are in your court. Only if they're in your court. It's very important to understand that concept. People who are directly in your court care about how diplomatic you as a character are. If they're not in your court, let's say they're just a vassal, for instance, or they are in some other person's court, then they're going to be impacted by your state diplomacy score. Not your personal diplomacy score, the state diplomacy score. The way that the math works is that there's a formula for it, but I can't recall it directly off the top of my head. But if you look at, say, in your court, and then you hover over one of these people, notice how it says personal diplomacy plus 3. Essentially, right around like 8 diplomacy or so is going to be fairly decent. Anything below 8 is going to be a very quick rounding down of the personal diplomacy score. And if you go above 8, you're going to get a very, very high personal diplomacy score. However, when you're looking at someone who is not a direct person in your court, you're going to see that state diplomacy plus 11. This math is much, much simpler. It's your state diplomacy score divided by 2. So diplomacy affects people's opinion of you. And that's basically it. It's really all that diplomacy does. Except for when you're talking about your council. There's certain counselor activities that we'll talk about in a bit, but that is essentially what diplomacy is going to do for you. Personal diplomacy affects people in your court, like your wife. You know, your wife's opinion of you is going to be your personal diplomacy, and then state diplomacy is going to be based on is going to affect everybody else. Well, how does state diplomacy get calculated? Well, your state scores are your personal score plus your counselor's score, plus half of the value of your spouse, rounded down. So she has 8 diplomacy. Divide that by 2, equals 4. We can see that we've got 5 plus 4 plus 13. Our counselor, we choose one character in our realm to represent us as our chancellor. He is our diplomatic character. His diplomatic skill is 13, and so that number gets added to our number to represent our state diplomacy score. So, unsurprisingly, the better your counselors are, the better your ability to influence other people around you will be. Now, let's talk about martial score. Martial score affects primarily the levy that you're able to raise. It also can affect combat if you're leading troops. It affects things like your chance to arrest people and whether or not it's going to be successful. And can't really think of anything else off the top of my head. So we have a martial score of 8, which means that because we are below 10, we're going to experience a penalty to our levy. You go here, you can see we have owner martial skill minus 10%. For every 1 martial score that you are above or below 10 personal martial skill, you will experience a 5% penalty to your levy, or a 5% bonus to your levy. So if your character is exceptionally good at martial score, you'll have a much larger levy than someone who is bad at it. Unfortunately, we have a 10% penalty. You'll also see that capital county plus 50% bonus. Because we're independent, and this is our capital county, the county we've determined is a capital of our country or our realm, we get a 50% bonus to this specific county. So that does offset our penalty, but again, if our martial score was higher, we'd have even more troops. Now, state martial is calculated the same way as state diplomacy is. It's going to be your score plus half of your spouse plus your counselor. So she has a score of 12, gets rounded down by half, and we see the 8 plus 6 plus 12. It's the state martial score that affects arrest chance. Your state martial score versus another character's state martial score is it's like a number battle. Whoever's is higher affects the influence of arrest chance. So for instance, if we go look at, say, our Chancellor, he has a state martial score of 12. We have a state martial score of 26. It'd be very easy for us to arrest somebody like this. So if we wanted to just imprison him, we have a 64% chance. We don't have any reason to do this, and we're not going to do this, but that is how that 64% is calculated, is based on state martial scores. Or I'm sorry, I'm mistaken, it's state intrigue. The percent chance here is state intrigue. Oh, that's interesting. I could have sworn that was based on martial score. Could have been. At some point in the past. I don't know. Oh, well, you learn something new every day. State stewardship, or stewardship stat. So your stewardship affects things like income. Your personal stewardship is going to affect your domain limit, which is up here. It's the amount of territory that you're allowed to personally control without penalty. And then your state stewardship score is going to affect your income. So if you go to your income screen, which again you can access just by clicking on the County of Desmond, that's your top holding. You can see right here our domain has 8.53 personal income. We're making 6.3 gold per year off of the county, the barony there. It's getting modified by a stewardship bonus of 33%. And that 33% comes from our state stewardship. There's a formula for it, but essentially the more state stewardship you have, the better your income. And I'm fairly certain the equations, it's roughly like 2% bonus income per state stewardship. Somewhere around there. You don't need to know the exact number. Same calculation as the wife. Intrigue, as we've just learned, affects arrest chance, which makes no sense. That tooltip might be wrong, because I'm pretty sure it was based on martial in the past. I'm getting hung up on this now. But it could be. Could very well be. Maybe there's a patch that I missed. So intrigue affects things like your ability to plot against other characters. And it also, most importantly, protects you from other characters plotting against you. The higher your personal intrigue, the less likely you are to get killed in a plot. The higher your state intrigue, the less likely other characters are to get plot power against you. And also your state intrigue, as we've learned, again, it affects your arrest chance if you are going to go and try to arrest somebody. Now, intrigue is something we should mention specifically, because it is possible to make your wife into your spy master, which is your intrigue-based advisor. If you make your wife into your spy master, though, just be aware that you will not get her bonus plus the counselor bonus. You'll only get the counselor bonus. So remember how you get half of your spouse's stats plus your counselor? If you make your wife into the counselor, then you only get some of it. But generally speaking, unless your wife has exceptionally high intrigue, you're probably going to want to keep your spouse on her own, and then choose someone else to get the highest state intrigue score. And then finally, we have learning. Learning doesn't really do very much in this game anymore. It used to do more, but they've changed it and they never really buffed it back up. But what learning really affects primarily is just your technology. If you are Duke level or higher, then you will experience, you'll get technology points, and learning affects the growth of all three. Martial affects military, stewardship affects economy, and then diplomacy affects culture, but learning affects all three. And so that's really all that learning does. Generally, if you're a feudal lord, you do not want to focus on having high learning because it's not going to benefit you tremendously. You can play the entire game and completely ignore technology, and you'll do just fine. But technology on its own can be fun. So that kind of covers the attributes, and yeah, without further ado, we really should play this game. So let's set about having our council actually do something. Every counselor has 3 activities that they can do. We'll go ahead and use our Chancellor to improve diplomatic relations, fabricate claims, or sow dissent. We're going to go ahead and try to fabricate a claim on our next door neighbor, one of them, so that we have a right to attack them. Before we do that, let's go size them up. Go to the character, click the realm tree. We don't need this to be full screen anymore. We can see that this guy has a total levy of 345, and this guy has a total levy of 443. It's currently at 351, but it's going to be higher. You can see that he has some of his levy not actually maxed out. So we'll target the guy who's got fewer troops. Go ahead and try to fabricate a claim on Thulmund. We're going to use our Marshal to train troops, most likely, is generally going to be the best thing. Suppress revolts, not really necessary right now, and researching military technology is not really necessary right now. We'll train troops in Desmond. That's going to raise the total levy. You can see the number right here. Train troops plus 30%. Don't ask me why this tooltip doesn't show it here. In order to see the effect, you have to actually go into the holding and then go see it. On any of these, you can see the total modifiers. You've got levy multiplier 42.5%. You've got owner martial skill, which isn't even correct. It says owner martial skill plus 40. It's really owner martial skill minus 10 plus 50 equals plus 40. Convoluted tooltips, they happen. And then the trained troops modifier it's modified on top of that. Essentially, it does do what it says it will do. It increases the amount of troops that you get by 30%. But it's silly. Our son is currently our steward. We will have him collect some taxes for us. That's going to increase the local tax modifier of holdings that we own personally by 22.5%. So it does not affect the city or the bishopric, but the castle here will have a collect taxes plus 22.5% bonus. And it also gives him a chance, possible outcome, special tithe collected, 3.38% yearly. So there's a random chance that he could just have an event happen where he'll collect extra gold for us. Our spy master, we could have him go study technology. He'd be pretty good at it with his 18 intrigue score, but it's not really necessary quite yet. I think we'll actually have him build a spy network in Thulmund, because there's a chance that he can spread some vicious rumors and make this character's vassals like him less, maybe even brand him as a homosexual, and that could cause this guy to have less levy to protect himself in the future. And then finally, our court chaplain, we can have him go and improve religious relations with the Pope. We haven't even talked about the Pope yet. There's so many topics in this game. Once you've played the game for a while, all this stuff just kind of comes naturally, but when you're just trying to explain it all from the very beginning, it's just amazing. There's a lot of information to cover. We haven't even covered laws, we haven't covered technology. We haven't really done much of anything yet. Okay, we can go on a pilgrimage. So a pretty good idea to do that. So these are the decisions that you can make, things that you can do as a character. We can invite a holy man, invite a noble, present a debutante, hold a feast, summer fair, go on a grand hunt, go on a pilgrimage, expel the Jews. We're going to go on a pilgrimage. We have to pay a certain amount of money to do that. It's generally a very good idea to do this when you have low income because it costs less. It's a factor in the game called scaled wealth. The more money you have, the more it costs to do things. Or if you have very little income, then it costs very little. So for us, it's very inexpensive to go on a pilgrimage. If the King of France wanted to, he'd have to pay quite a bit. So we'll go on a pilgrimage. I shall go on a pilgrimage to seek God's grace at one of the holy places of Christianity. And so with that, I think we'll leave it there. Next, we'll probably talk about traits and how that affects things. And we'll also, again, let some time pass. It's been 3 weeks. 3 videos, 3 weeks. It seems reasonable. At this rate, we'll be done with the game in about 4 years. So thanks for watching, everyone. See you soon.